Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Blair, editor of Retail Touchpoints. Today, I'm very happy to have Eiko Kawano, who's the Group Experience Director at the digital consultancy Publicis Sapient. She's joining me for this Retail Reset conversation. Our goal with these is to provide a curated virtual forum for retail executives to map their post-coronavirus recovery strategies. Today, we'll be looking at the survival and the possible reinvention of the in-store browse shopping experience. Eiko, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to Retail Touchpoints.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, so let's dive into the tough question here. What do you think are going to be the most significant changes based on the safety requirements coming from COVID-19 that shoppers are going to see when they do return to stores, or they already are to some extent? And how do you think these changes are going to affect the shopper journey and the psychology of shoppers?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest changes will just be around a heightened focus on safety, but in a new kind of context. So I think shoppers in general have become used to distancing measures in grocery stores, for example, or lining up outside of grocery stores in order to get in to do a shop. That's quite different to take a grocery context and then look at safety in a context where the customer is sort of used to sort of browsing and having fun and maybe wandering, getting lost in the store a little bit, wasting time. I think that the focus on safety is going to feel quite dramatic. And it looks like some retailers are making moves to do things like encourage customers to wear masks, even require customers to wear masks, even having their temperature taken at the door like Apple is doing. I think that's going to be quite a sharp contrast to the sort of previous browse experience. And the impact on kind of the customer's mental model may shift as a result, going from intent to sort of go into a store to whether window shop or browse around is now becoming very much sort of focused. I need to get in, I need to get out. I'm sort of being encouraged to get out of the store relatively quickly. So I think it will be kind of a stark contrast in the experience.
Sure. I can totally see that. I'm wondering if you think this is going to have different impacts in different verticals. I mean, there's apparel, there's shoes, soft goods, luxury, all different ones. Which ones do you think are going to, where these changes you're talking about will likely have the greatest impact?
Yeah, I think apparel for sure. We're seeing some retailers like American Eagle putting items into quarantine after they're tried on for 24 to 48 hours. That's really interesting because there may be impacts to the available inventory on the floor, so there just might not be as much available to buy. Heightened sort of sanitation measures in the beauty category. So Sephora's really increased kind of this focus on sanitation. No more testers in beauty anymore. I mean, that's the primary driver for a customer to go into a cosmetic store is to sort of touch and feel and try on the product. So that will be quite different. I think toys is another really interesting category where, you know, previously the use case is I take my kids into a store so they can touch and feel the toys. And that really won't be the case, at least in the short term. So I think customers are really going to sort of have to think about the experience they're going to have in the store and how that might change when they sort of explore these different categories. Jewelry is another good one where you want to try on the jewelry, see how it looks on. So all of those things are probably going to shift pretty dramatically.
Yeah. Well, how have the essential, you mentioned, you know, the new concept of grocery shopping, and I'm wondering how essential retailers and the non-essential retailers that have started to reopen, how have they been dealing with these challenges? Certainly we've seen, you know, the floor markings and mask requirements, et cetera. But I'm wondering if you have any sense of how shoppers are reacting to these, and whether if COVID-19, you know, becomes more of a long-term thing rather than an immediate crisis, their attitudes might change. I know it's hard to predict how people's attitudes will change, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's really interesting, just based on some early numbers. It looks like foot traffic seems to be sort of about the same as previous years. Now that could just be related to a burst of people just being glad to get back into the store and wanting to sort of have that store experience. So I think time will tell. Anecdotally, looking at some of the comments out there, looks like customers are very much focused on safety in the same way the stores are. So that sort of commitment on the store's behalf to keeping the customers safe, I think will be a priority both on the part of the customer and the store. I think that it'll be really interesting, and time will tell to see how customers react over the mid and long term. The friction experienced in walking into a store where safety sort of is paramount, it'll be interesting to see how customers sort of deal with that and whether they sort of gravitate back towards the online channel. I think we're going to see some vacillation in behavior over the next while.
Okay. Are there any specific tools or solutions that you've seen that have been helpful? I mean, I'm getting pitches every day for everything from overhead systems or heat map systems that can tell you how far apart people are to, really simple things like differently designed door handles that you don't have to touch with your hand. I'm wondering, what you've seen that's interesting or seems to be working.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of the move towards contactless shopping was either emerging or in place before COVID. So Amazon Go is sort of the obvious example of the first store where customers didn't have to interact with staff or anything other than the product, really. We've seen scan and go and scan and pay type apps in stores. So I think we'll see those things sort of start to reemerge. All sort of in an attempt to keep the experience as touch-free as possible. I think we'll continue to see things like one-way sort of footpaths through stores and pathways through stores. Those are some of the specific tools. I think getting into some of the more like augmented reality space, which is really interesting. Could you hold your phone up as you walk into a store and sort of see the best route through that store in order to get you in and out as quickly as possible? I think we'll also see, especially in the beauty category, sort of virtual try-on experiences. Some of those are on digital channels now, but there's no reason that can't be part of the in-store experience. Last year, Ulta launched the Glam Lab that allows customers to sort of virtually try on cosmetics. You could see there being a use case for that in a store as well. So I think it's really interesting to think sort of the increased use of technology and how that can kind of transform the store experience. Yeah.
Okay. The other major thing we've seen with COVID-19 is, especially at the beginning, huge surges in online and at essential retailers, some form of panic buying, interrupted supply chains and empty shelves. I'm wondering if you see potential differences in store design that will be coming down the pike as retailers are dealing not only with how customers are interacting with the store, but how they themselves are keeping the store operating.
Yeah, I think the design of the store is really an interesting topic, and sort of thinking about how can the store experience be sort of as modular as possible to allow for more kind of physical distancing between people that could be supported by specific sort of merchandising layouts. Thinking about stores sort of being responsive as we may see surges in COVID-19 and having to sort of change format quickly. Also thinking about things like micro-fulfillment centers in stores. So as people start to gravitate and continue to gravitate rather to online shopping and potentially looking at stores fulfilling those online orders, we may see an increase in non-essential retail moving towards more store formats that are dedicated for the picking experience. So in-store pickers able to sort of select from a specific inventory that's not accessible to the rest of the public. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch the shifts in store design and sort of see how different retailers are adapting to the changing situation.
Yeah. Well, and like so many other things, the dark store and micro fulfillment center concept was already kind of bubbling up and just seems to have gotten a real boost from the current situation. Um, so you mentioned the picking experience, and I'm wondering if there are ways that the picker can act as a proxy for the customer, and if there are technologies or ways of doing that can both get customers what they're looking for, but also be a more satisfying, interesting shopping experience for them as well. How might that play out, or how might that be constructed?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think of the picker as a proxy for a customer, and certainly that's really sort of the way it works in grocery, right? Especially with services like Instacart, where really you have someone shopping on your behalf. I think the most sort of obvious opportunity is in big box stores that have a grocery and general merchandise offering. Once the picker sort of completed the grocery shop, enabling them to sort of shop from the rest of the store assortment could be really interesting, because it could lead the customer into higher margin categories. So say they finished the grocery shop and they're looking at a few apparel add-ons or what have you. That could be a really, really interesting model for big box stores to look at, and really sort of add some value into the customer experience. I think it's also interesting to think about that outside of grocery. And I think where the line starts to get blurry is in sort of the concept of this like virtual personal shopper,
Right.
where we're not really thinking of them as pickers anymore, but as items become more and more fulfilled through stores, could a sales associate help to sort of confirm the order, maybe suggest some add-on items at the sort of end of the picking experience? That could be quite interesting. There's a retailer called Buck Mason that has a virtual fitting room service where you book an appointment with a sales associate and they actually show the items that the customer may be interested in. So it's sort of bridging that gap between the digital channel and that in-store tactile experience. And for customers who may not want to go in store, it brings the store a little bit closer. So it could be quite interesting. I mean, I think the challenge is to find ways to do that in a way that's cost effective. So definitely looking at kind of higher margin categories, but
Sure.
could be an interesting opportunity.
And might it be literally like you're FaceTiming with a salesperson in the store, either, from a secure location or from your home, and they're like showing you, here's this shirt, or here's this dish towel, or whatever it is you're shopping for? Is that maybe how it might go?
I think so. A lot of the research that I've done suggests that customers feel a bit overwhelmed when shopping online. There's so much assortment. Sometimes it's hard to really get a sense of what that product will be like in real life. And I think there's some great services out there like video for apparel and that kind of thing that give a better sense of the product in real life. But it could be really interesting if a sales associate sort of filled most of the order, but then kind of confirmed the order with the customer and kind of walked through the items one by one. That might be quite compelling. And I think the business benefit is just that upsell opportunity, right?
Sure.
Hey, there's a matching wallet that that
Right.
matches the bag you're interested in. I think that digital channels and online experiences do that fairly well to some degree, but there's nothing quite like having a personal relationship with someone to suggest an add-on item.
Yeah, and if they can establish a level of trust, I mean, it sounds like the kind of personal shopper or concierge shopper that some high-end retailers have been using for many years, and I can totally imagine shopping for something and asking, does this shirt feel soft or does it feel rough, next to your skin? It's like things you would just do yourself. You might need to formulate the question.
Exactly. And I think it's really interesting to think about how sales associates can use data more effectively to really understand that customer profile. So if I go back to the grocery example, and I'm doing an online grocery shop and someone is picking that order for me, can substitutions get really smart so that we don't have to have that same back and forth over text message? Is this the one you want? Is this the one you want? If the data can tell us what that customer might be interested in, then that actually shortcuts quite a lengthy step in the process. So outside of grocery, it's interesting to think about how can we empower retailers with a better understanding of the customer, such that we're able to give really smart recommendations, and certainly, again, application to digital channels, but a really sort of interesting use case for the store as well.
Yeah. So that might be something like, this customer, you can substitute on this product if their first choice isn't available, but they absolutely must have this particular brand for another type of product.
Exactly. Or we know that they're allergic to this type of ingredient. So the system is going to tell the picker that they should avoid anything with that sort of that ingredient in it. So just sort of shortcutting that substitutions experience.
Sure. So I would ask, as kind of a wrap up, I mean, what kind of advice would you give to retailers? I mean, in general, and also in the situations and scenarios that we've been talking about, where seem to be moving to another phase of the pandemic, and there's stores reopening. If you had the ear of a retail CEO, what kinds of things would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think just based on, and this is sort of the obvious one, but safety is paramount, right? And showing empathy for the customer's sort of state of mind, making safety a selling point as opposed to sort of a barrier in the store, I think is really interesting. Sephora has a new role in store, which is a hygiene leader. And I think that's really compelling because it's demonstrating to the customer the sort of care for their safety. Beyond that, I think retailers really need to have a solid omni-channel picture of a customer. So what are they doing in store? What are they doing online? Because people are really going to be going back and forth. I think, again, we're going to see a lot of vacillation in buying habits. And so being able to connect the digital behavior to the in-store behavior is going to be really critical, so that we can better understand both their patterns, but what they need, and start to draw hypotheses about where in the journey the experience is either excelling or disappointing the customer. So I think a solid understanding, robust understanding of the customer journey is really important as well. And I guess the last thing is, how can we keep it fun? So how can we look at technology as a way to augment the in-store experience, trying small experiments and seeing how they perform maybe in one store. Hey, we did a virtual try-on experience in this store. It worked really well. Let's roll it out to other stores. Changing in-store operations is a significant endeavor. And so starting small, really testing out opportunities and then learning from them and then scaling them, I think is really important. And that really sort of relies on internal agility and being able to sort of try different things. But any way to sort of keep the customer engaged and make them feel like that browse experience that they used to love hasn't gone away. It's still fun. It's still exploratory. It's still a pleasurable experience. It's just a little safer.
Yeah, right. Well, that's such a great point. I mean, I think there's going to have to be, I agree, that emphasis on, it's a fun, pleasurable experience. It's not a chore. It's not something you have to do. It's something you want to do. I think retailers are going to be looking at all different kinds of ways to be experiential that don't necessarily involve touch or that kind of thing. But some great points, Eiko. Thank you so much for spending some time and sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all the viewers. We hope all these videos have been helpful for you. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thanks so much.